The day I called my daughter from the emergency room, I had a broken wrist, 3 cracked ribs, and a phone that was almost out of battery. She picked up on the 4th ring. I told her I'd been in an accident. I told her the car was totaled and I was alone and I needed her to come. And she said, "Dad, Aaron has his firm's dinner tonight. Can this wait until tomorrow?" I didn't say anything for a long moment. I just sat there on that paper-covered examination table, hospital gown open in the back, listening to the hum of the fluorescent lights above me. "Sure," I said. "It can wait." I hung up and stared at the wall. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not broke, I want to be clear about that. Something older and quieter than breaking. Like a door closing gently in an empty house. Let me go back to where it started, because that's not where it started. My wife, Elaine, used to say I was too easy on our daughter. "You give Renee whatever she wants and she knows it," she'd tell me. Not angry, just matter of fact, the way she said most things. Elaine was like that. Precise. She didn't waste words. After 31 years of marriage, I could read her whole mood from the way she set her coffee cup down in the morning. Soft meant she'd slept well. A little harder than necessary meant something was already bothering her before 7 a.m. Renee was our only child. We tried for more and it hadn't happened, and somewhere along the way we'd stopped trying and started pouring everything into the one we had. She was smart. Genuinely smart. The kind of kid who read the encyclopedia for fun and argued with her teachers when she thought they were wrong and was usually right. She got a scholarship to a state school, studied accounting, got a good job at a firm in the city within 6 months of graduating. Elaine and I drove up to help her move into her first apartment, and I remember standing in the parking lot afterward, watching her wave from the 3rd-floor window, and feeling like I'd done something right. That was before Aaron. She met him at 27. He was 34. Already a partner at a small law firm, divorced once, no kids. Elaine met him twice before the wedding and came home both times quiet in a way that meant she was thinking something she hadn't decided to say yet. "Do you like him?" I asked her after the second dinner. She was quiet for a moment. "I think he's very good at being charming," she said. That was all. But I'd been married to her long enough to know that wasn't a compliment. The wedding was in March, at a venue Aaron chose. He had opinions about everything. The menu, the flowers, the seating chart. I offered to help with the bar tab, and he said, with that smile he always had, "We've got it covered, Frank." He called me Frank from the beginning. Never, Dad. I told myself it didn't bother me. It did. After the wedding, things changed in ways that were small at first. Renee stopped calling on Sundays the way she used to. When we did talk, there was a new efficiency to her. Like she was checking something off a list. The visits got shorter. One Thanksgiving she told us they were going to Aaron's colleague's house instead, and when I said I'd hoped we could all be together, Aaron said something from the other room. I didn't catch what, and she said, "Dad, we'll do Christmas, okay?" Christmas that year they came for 4 hours. Elaine never said anything directly, but I noticed she stopped asking when Renee was coming to visit. She just stopped asking, the way you stop asking about something when the answer started to hurt. Elaine got sick in February 3 years ago. Not a dramatic diagnosis. Not at first. Fatigue. Some pain in her back she'd been ignoring for months because that's what she did. She finally went to the doctor in January, and by February we had a word for it. Pancreatic. Stage 3. I called Renee from the kitchen while Elaine was resting. I kept my voice steady. I gave her the facts the way the doctor had given them to us. The treatment plan, the timeline, what we were hoping for, and what we were preparing for. There was a silence on the other end, and then she said, "Oh, Dad." And for a moment she sounded like herself again, like the girl who used to fall asleep on the couch with her head in Elaine's lap. She came that weekend. She sat with her mother for 2 hours, and they talked about things I wasn't there for. And when she came downstairs, her eyes were red. Aaron had stayed home. Something about a deposition. Over the next 8 months, Renee visited 6 times. I counted because I had a lot of time to count things in those months. 6 times in 8 months, 4 hours average. Each time she left, Elaine would sit quietly for a while and then say something like, "She's busy," and I could never tell if she was reassuring me or herself. I want to be fair. I know life gets complicated. I know people don't always know how to handle illness. But here's the thing about watching someone you love get smaller and quieter over 8 months. You notice who shows up and who finds reasons not to. Elaine's sister drove 4 hours every 3 weeks. Our neighbor Bev, who barely knew us, brought food twice a month without being asked. The woman from Elaine's book club organized a rotation. Our daughter visited 6 times. The last 2 months, Elaine was home with hospice care. I slept on a cot next to our bed because I couldn't sleep in the bed without her beside me, even when she was right there. I held her hand and watched television on mute and learned every sound the house made at 3 a.m. Renee came once in those 2 months. Erin had a conference, she said. She was needed at work. She'd come as soon as she could. Elaine died on a Tuesday morning in October. Early, just after 5. The light was just starting to come through the curtains, and it was the quietest I'd ever heard a house be. I sat with her for a while, then I made coffee I didn't drink. Then I called Renee. She answered on the second ring. I said, "Sweetheart, your mother's gone." There was a silence. Then I heard Erin's voice in the background, low, asking something, and then Renee said, "Dad, can I call you back? We're literally in the middle of something." I said, "Okay." She called back 40 minutes later. I had already called the hospice nurse by then and Elaine's sister, and I had sat back down in the kitchen and looked at the coffee I still hadn't drunk and thought about 40 years of mornings with that woman, every single one of them. When Renee called back, she was crying, which I understood. She said she was so sorry. She said she loved her mother. She said she'd be there as soon as she could. "When can you come?" I asked. She said she'd have to check with Erin about the schedule. I put the phone down on the table and didn't pick it back up for a while. She came for the funeral. Erin came too, pressed suit, firm handshake, the same smile. He gave a short hug that meant nothing. Renee was sad in the way people are sad at funerals. Genuinely, I think, but briefly. She spent part of the reception on her phone by the window. They left that evening to beat traffic. I stood in Elaine's kitchen, our kitchen, after they drove away, surrounded by casserole dishes people had brought, and I felt the specific loneliness of being in a full house that still feels completely empty. I found the letter 3 weeks later. I was cleaning out Elaine's closet, not because I was ready, but because the staying still was worse than the moving. I found a shoebox on the high shelf, the one I couldn't see from my height without a step stool. Inside was a small envelope with my name on it, in her handwriting, and underneath it a second envelope marked, "For our attorney." I sat down on the edge of the bed and opened mine. She'd written it 18 months earlier, not long after the diagnosis. It was 4 pages. I'm not going to share everything she said. But part of it was this. She told me she had spoken to our attorney and updated her will. She told me she had been watching and thinking carefully. She said, "I love Renee. I will always love her. But I also know what I saw these last months, and I know what you deserve, and I know what I want for you." I held those pages for a long time. Then I called our attorney, a man named Stuart, who'd handled our estate planning for 15 years. He told me Elaine had come in on her own without telling me 8 months before she passed. She had made very specific changes. I should explain how our finances worked, because it matters. When we married, we had nothing. I worked in HVAC for 12 years, saved everything I could, and eventually started my own company with a partner. We built it slowly. By the time I was 50, we had a profitable business, a paid-off house, and 2 rental properties that brought in steady income. Elaine handled all the bookkeeping for the business for 20 years. She had a head for numbers, which is probably where Renee got it. Everything was in both our names. Our assumption had always been that when one of us went, it would pass to the other, and eventually to Renee. What Elaine had done, very quietly and very carefully, was this. She had restructured her half of the estate into a trust. The trust was managed by Stuart. I was the primary beneficiary for my lifetime. Upon my death, the assets would go to Elaine's sister, not Renee. She had also written a letter of instruction separate from the will to Stuart. He read it to me carefully. It said that if Renee could demonstrate, over a period of no less than 3 years following Elaine's death, a genuine and sustained relationship with me, not visits driven by obligation, not appearances at holidays, but real presence, the trust administrator had discretion to amend the distribution. 3 years. Stuart said it was unusual but completely valid. He also told me that Elaine had thought about this for a long time, and that the day she came in she'd been calm and precise and absolutely certain. That was Elaine, right to the end. About a month after the funeral, Renee started calling more. Once a week, then twice. She came to visit in December, just her, without Erin. She sat in the kitchen and drank coffee and asked about my health and how the rental properties were doing. I answered her questions and watched her and didn't say anything about the will. In February, she suggested she and Aaron come for the weekend. They did. Aaron walked through the house in a way I can only describe as assessing. He asked about the neighborhood property values. He complimented the kitchen renovation. He talked about the rental market. That night I called Stuart and told him what I'd observed. She hasn't asked directly, he said. Not yet, I said. She asked in March. Not directly, but close enough. She said she wanted to talk about the future, and making sure I was taken care of, and whether I'd given any thought to estate planning. I told her Elaine had handled all of that and that Stuart had everything under control. I watched something move across her face that she quickly covered. I just worry about you, she said. I know you do, I said. What happened next, I did not plan and would not have chosen. Aaron had apparently done some research. In April, I received a letter from a different attorney, one I'd never met, stating that as my only child, Renee had concerns about my cognitive well-being following the loss of my spouse, and requesting that I undergo an evaluation. I sat with that letter for a long time. Then I called Stuart, and then I called my nephew, who is also an attorney, though he practices in a different state. His name isn't important. What's important is that he drove 4 hours to sit at my kitchen table and help me understand what was happening and what my options were. What was happening was that Aaron had filed a petition to have my mental competency reviewed, citing grief-related cognitive decline. It is a real legal mechanism, and it does get used for legitimate reasons. This was not a legitimate reason. This was a man who would look at a house and 2 rental properties and done the math. My nephew helped me prepare a response. I also called my own doctor, who had seen me regularly for 9 years and wrote a letter that was, in his words, unambiguous. I called Elaine's sister, who agreed to provide a statement. I called 2 neighbors who had seen me regularly since Elaine passed. The hearing was in May. It lasted less than an hour. The judge dismissed the petition. She did not look pleased about how it had been filed. Afterward, in the parking lot, Renee tried to talk to me. She said Aaron had acted on his own. She said she hadn't known how far he'd taken it. She was crying. I looked at my daughter, my only child, the person Elaine and I had built our whole lives around, and I felt something I didn't expect. Not anger, not satisfaction. Just a deep, exhausted sadness. Renee, I said, your mother gave you 3 years. She looked at me. What does that mean? Ask Stuart, I said. Tell him I said to explain it. I got in my car and drove home. She called Stuart. I know because he called me afterward briefly, just to tell me. He said she had listened quietly and then asked one question. Is there anything I can do? Stuart had told her that was precisely what her mother had left room for. Aaron, it turned out, had not just overplayed his hand in court. While preparing his case, he had accessed some financial records he shouldn't have. My accountant discovered it, and it was eventually referred to the state bar. I won't pretend I understood all the details. What I understood was that a man who had spent years managing my daughter's relationship with her own family had finally done something in daylight where people could see it clearly. Renee filed for divorce in July. I didn't celebrate. I'm telling you that honestly. I took no pleasure in it. A marriage ending, even a bad one, is a person's life falling apart, and that person is my daughter. But I'll tell you what I did notice. I noticed that once Aaron was gone, she started calling me the way she used to. Not the checking in calls, not the how are the properties doing calls, but calls where she'd just talk about nothing in particular. She called on a Tuesday night in August to tell me about a coworker who'd done something funny. That's it, just that. She started coming on weekends, not every weekend, but enough. In September she came and we raked the leaves in the backyard together, the same backyard she grew up playing in, and at some point she said, I think about all the visits I didn't make when Mom was sick. I didn't say anything. I can't explain it, she said. I know that's not enough, but I can't explain it. I know, I said, and I meant it. I think Aaron had been very careful and very patient about separating her from us, the way certain people are, and by the time it was obvious it was already deep in the foundation. I'm not saying she bears no responsibility. She's an adult. She made choices. But I also know my daughter. The one who read the encyclopedia for fun and argued with teachers and used to call her mother every Sunday, and I believe that person got buried for a while. I'm not sure when it started. Maybe before the wedding, maybe earlier. What I know is that she's fighting her way back. It's been almost 2 years since the hearing. Renee comes for dinner most Sundays now. She's renting an apartment not far from here. 30 minutes, which is close enough that it means something. She and Elaine's sister have started having lunch occasionally, which I didn't arrange and wasn't expecting. The rental properties were fine. The house is fine. Stewart handles everything and checks in quarterly. I still sleep on my side of the bed. I still make 2 cups of coffee some mornings before I remember. I still find things around the house that are just Elaine. A grocery list in her handwriting tucked in a kitchen drawer. Her reading glasses in the pocket of a coat I almost donated. 3 years Elaine had written. I thought that was her giving Renee time to prove herself. I've come to think it was also her giving me time to grieve and watch and decide for myself. She knew I'd forgive Renee too quickly if left to my own instincts. She knew me well enough to build a pause into the process. That was Elaine. Even at the end, she was still the smartest person in the room. I keep her letter in the nightstand. Some nights I read parts of it. Not all of it. Not yet. But enough to feel like she's still here, still precise, still saying exactly what she means. She used to tell me I was too easy on our daughter. She wasn't wrong. But she also left a door open. That was her too.